So when you talk about legislative intent, I know. I was the one that
You were the one that wrote that.
I helped to write that law. We worked with legislative analysts. We work with a representative and the senator on the other side, and they write a bill, and people participate in the drafts. And when we go to the committees, we speak to that bill. We say, this is what we want to see this bill used. This is how we want this bill to be enacted as law. And the purpose was to protect the non-custodial parent from not only having to spend more money that he doesn't have that should be used for the children, but also to be some kind of incentive to the custodial parent that this is not a game.
But this is against the law.
This is against the law, and you can go to jail.
And you're saying that if the other parent prevents you from seeing that child during your court-appointed time, they have, in fact. I mean, all this false belief out there that there is no custodial interference law on the books that protects that non-custodial parent, they're wrong. That these law enforcement officials are supposed to enforce that, and there are repercussions.
Right. We'd probably need to go back to the legislature and be more specific. But unfortunately, even when you are, they have the option, the district attorneys, of informing the police departments and law enforcement agencies how they view that law. They have that power.
All right. Okay, so you've got three things that would be three things that you're recommending. Anything else that you would suggest?
Well, there needs to be a citizens' review of judges.
A citizens' review.
Right
well,
now,
we've got the Judicial Standards Commission.
But it is not made of citizens the same way. They're basically appointed by the governor, and the governor vets them, and I just have to be honest with you and say that it needs to be made of people who have had difficulties in the system, because they're the ones who understand what it's like to go through. So in other words, if you're a computer programmer, you definitely want to get people who understand computers, but also people who understand problems using computers. You want to get an end user who's not an expert. You want to get people off the street. You want to get a good cross-section of people. So grandparents need to be included in that. Some other relatives need to be included in that. Non-custodial parents need to be included with that. And that's no criteria. There's no criteria for selection.
How possible would it be to get a jury trial in New Mexico? What did you feel was the reaction that you got from people when you mentioned a jury trial in family court?
Well, initially they accepted my petition, but it was kicked out. The court rules stated that there's no jury trial for domestic relation cases, and it was, if you look in the gosh, I forget actually what you would call it, but if you look in the list of pleadings in the case, you'll see that it was disallowed, that it wasn't permitted because
And they're just basing it on their own interpretation though, right?
Well, there is no law that states otherwise.
Okay, so then they're choosing to interpret the law their own way, right?
Well, that's the way they interpret it.
Now, okay, what do you think is the problem with the judges and the amount of mistakes and the amount of animosity that is going on in the courtrooms? What do you base that on? Is it?
Well, I think it's easier. Whoever is the petitioner has the advantage, and see, it's kind of like I liken it. I have two children now, a 6 and a 5-year-old, and if something happens between the two children, the one that runs up to mommy and daddy and says, "Mommy or Daddy, this is what happened. My sister threw this at me," and she's crying and she's saying, "Oh, and she hurt me." Well, your first inclination is to take the side of that person who's crying and appears to be hurt, because you don't have the other side of the story.
Yeah.
So I think it's human nature that whoever is the petitioner gets the advantage.
Howard, you had success. How did that happen? Were you able to resolve your case?
Well, I mean, I measure success in different ways.
Right.
Success also in that it eventually turns out to good. I learn about the court system and I'm able to help other people now, so I'm able to succeed in the sense I help other people avoid the pitfalls because I see them coming. I worked with several attorneys. I did paralegal work for about 20 years. I do have a very good understanding of the federal law related to the two things: Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Act and the Parental Kidnapping Protection Act.
But you worked something out with the mom without going into the court system,
Well,
is that right?
no, I went into the court systems and I wasn't able to resolve it completely because what happened is there were attorney's fees. If you can imagine, 1 month of attorney's fees was adjudicated as costing $30,000. Well, that was immediately put on me as child support, which I could not pay. How many people can pay $30,000 immediately? You will pay this total amount.
The attorney's fees was accounted as if it were child
Yeah,
support.
it's done a lot. It happens a lot. And that way it makes the person look bad,
Right.
and it puts them at a disadvantage. And at 15% annual interest rate, you can't ever pay that off.
It's absurd. It's
My total would have been over $100,000 by the time that I was able to resolve the case. And I did that because I saw that politics got involved with me, so I got involved with politics.
Boy, there's so much more we could talk about, Howard. I really appreciate you coming on and telling us the
Thanks.
story. But you know, the end result is that you were able to work something out later on, and the idea was that you never, after this temporary restraining order, you never were reunited with your children again.
Not in a normal way.
Not
No.
and
No.
this was all because of some kind of a legal trick that was pulled on you, and then New Mexico illegally assumed jurisdiction.
Right.
And it just goes on and on.
It's called unclean hands and irreprehensible conduct. It's a legal,
Unclean hands, New Mexico, and
irreprehensible conduct.
irreprehensible
And those are
conduct.
violations of both the UCCJA and the PKPA.
All right. Well, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
pleasure.
Howard.
Thank
yeah,
you.
I hope you come back again.
All right, well, thanks.
I'm tempted to move to where you are so I can help you run for office.
Oh, thanks.
Howard DeLa Cruz-Bancroft, our guest. We've got more. We'll be talking to Lance Clefetta soon, but we're going to check out this video now and stay with us on You Judge.
Same thing over and over.
Gene and Michael Kidd never imagined their retirement would play out like this.
I feel like I'm not in America. I can't believe it. I've been hijacked off the street virtually and imprisoned.
The kids lived here in this Richardson home for decades, but for months now it's been this tiny room. They've lost control over everything, their money, their home, even their car. They've been robbed of their dignity, even their voice. And who's responsible? The state of Texas.
We're still kind of in a state of shock.
Kidd worked as an engineer at KDFW for 23 years. He retired in 2001 with pension, retirement account, and Social Security. Last month, he called the station for help. The kids have no children and no relatives nearby. In November, Michael fell and broke his hip here at the house and was rushed to the hospital and into surgery. Gene waited by his side. But after several days, the hospital called Adult Protective Services, reporting that Gene had been in the waiting room and wasn't eating. What happened next is a complicated legal tale filed with the Collin County Probate Court. Caseworkers paint a picture of two incompetent old people, aged 67 and 70, suffering from dementia, who've mismanaged their finances and used poor judgment. It says Michael is verbally abusive, even attempted to assault Gene.
Coca-Cola will be fine.
Michael says Gene has memory trouble, but denies everything else.
That's okay.
A judge determined the kids were incapacitated, so the state sent them to the Countryside Nursing Home in Pilot Point and is now burning through their money to pay for their care. How much money's left?
I know what my income was, and it was more than enough to take care of my bills. So what's all this giving these people money to keep me in a place where I'm deteriorating, instead of getting better?
The monthly tab for a couple at Countryside is about $7,000. Court records show the guardian paid $11,000 out of the kids' money for 5 months. The state's Medicaid program kicks in the rest.
I could be at the Hilton for this kind of money.